Greetings, my name is Shimei, and this is the State of the Campaign for the week of October 13th, 2013. We decided to have a 2v2 battle. I'm going to give you guys the setting, but this is what happened this week. It was just the 2v2 battle in the campaign. It was rather long. It actually took 6 hours, I believe, or maybe 5.5 for us to get the entire thing done. So that was the only battle we fought this weekend, but it was a large one. I compressed it down. We recorded all of it, but there's no way I'd be able to show you all 6 hours of it all at once. So I'll give you a summation and the setting for the battle. So this is what I read to the guys to get them the idea of why this battle was happening. During the recent raid on the undead territory, the High Elves captured a single prisoner. A lesser necromancer abandoned by the winds of magic, yet still maintained in undeath by some malevolent will. The elves bound the creature with chains of light, and through cleansing rituals and under magical compulsion, the former wizard was forced to answer their questions. They learned that this rotting corpse was once a man of the Empire, an explorer that led an expedition onto these isles, but died long ago. He was raised into undeath by some greater power, and until very recently had spent the majority of his last few years learning the dark arts from his master. He describes his master's residence in great detail, but even under direct compulsion would never mention his master's name. He describes a large mansion in the mountains of the south, bordered by cliffs and forests, hidden by mists and shadows. He speaks of a book his master used to teach him the arts, and a crystal he seemed to draw power from, located at the highest point in the mansion for which he was forbidden to enter. He speaks of the book lovingly, as if it were the true teacher his cruel master never was. He says that when he and his master left that place for the remains of Sigmar's folly, that the book and crystal were left there, sealed tight and secure in a shrouding mist. Before his soul was released from the husk of a body, through the questioning of the elves, they did manage to get a location from him. As they brought forward a map and had him point to the mansion's location, their faces grew grim. The location of this estate was directly through Chaos-owned territory. Knowing their armies would suffer greatly passing through Chaos-tainted lands unassisted, and not knowing what evil could have been left behind in the estate to protect it, the elves sent emissaries to the newly arrived lizardmen. While communication was strained and difficult, the lizardmen seemed to agree that this could be the key to removing the undead as a threat altogether. United in purpose, the two decided to combine forces and advance through enemy territory. As the armies crossed through the tainted and barren lands that were once Sigmar's folly, they remained unhindered. The Chaos Gods had instructed their servants that these forces must be allowed to accomplish their objectives, and that no action must be taken against such a combined force. The undead leader's agents had been listening and watching the interrogation of the necromancer, and they wanted the book that he spoke of. However, the enemy forces would prove to be too much to handle alone. Knowing that the twisted dark general approached the orcs, he sent a talking crow to parley with the war boss, and amidst dodging poorly aimed rocks thrown by some of the boys, it described the situation to the largest orc present. It showed him a full picture in the sky of a glowing green crystal hanging above the mansion, and one of his chief shamans spoke up. "Big shiny green thing, that's ours." The undead leader agreed to give him the crystal so long as he got the book, and so the terms were set. Still untrusting of his very recent enemy, the war boss went with the best of his boys as a guard for himself and protection against double-crossing. The two armies met and pursued the armies of order with haste. The elven mages and lizardman casters had a great deal of work to do, dispelling the magic concealing the manor from the world's view, and with that delay, both armies arrived on site nearly in tandem. As the forces approached the manor with the glowing crystal, lighting the battlefield with an eerie glow, a single man-shaped figure appeared on the ramparts of the house's tower. He spoke, and his words pierced through the ruckus of armies setting themselves up for battle, silencing the orc boys and causing even the zombies to moan slightly quieter. "My name is Sergio von Karstein, owner of this land, and you will vacate my property immediately, or myself and my new brothers will force you out ourselves." At the mention of his brothers, 9 more figures step onto the ramparts, each wearing empirical full plate and carrying an impossibly large weapon on their shoulders. Dressed in the blue and white of Middenheim, it was obvious where this vampire had recruited his most recent brothers. Their eyes glowed menacingly, even from afar, and sent a shiver down many a spine. So the forces were lizardmen and high elves versus undead and orcs. The objectives of both forces was to occupy the building in the center of the tables. We were played on 8x4 tables, so it's one of our largest battles yet. The rewards would go to the combined force that managed to clear out the vampires inside, and it would be a permanent bonus to your armies on the campaign map. So it was decent rewards. But in addition to the rewards for winning the scenario, each faction was given an additional bonus objective that they could accomplish for extra rewards. The winning side, Order of Destruction, had the permanent bonus, but they all had something special. For the elves, I gave them Dead and Loving It, which was a card that, amidst the death throes of the Necromancer, he gave the elves more specific information, or at least a inclination that there was a casket available for looting, essentially, on the battlefield, which was set up in the enemy's deployment zone, the undead deployment zone in this case. For the Lizardmen, I gave them Don't Go in the Water. And for that one, some of the Skink Scouts found a raving lunatic as they approached the manor. They piled on top of him in order to silence his crazed rantings so as not to give away their position. He doesn't calm down, but his gibberish is reduced to the level of sputters and muttering. He keeps on saying he's lost his bones, his lucky bones. He lost them in the lake, he did. He lost his lucky bones. And so I set up a lake on the far right side. The undead and the orcs were deployed on the right side of this video. And I put the lake on the far right side. The Lizardmen's objective was to search through the lake for the lucky bones, and if they could get them, they would have them permanently for the remainder of the battle. And the remainder of the campaign. The orcs, I gave them an objective to try to out-magic the Lizardmen and the High Elves, which is a tall order in and of themselves. They're both very good magic users, and the orc player only had a single level 2 Goblin Shaman, but he did very well. Yeah, if we wanted to go over what happened in the battle, to sum it up, it was very, very close. And the first few turns were bad for both sides, with Dispels failing terribly on the Lizardmen and failing to cast anything with their Slann. Like, the Slann ran out of power in his first turn, so he didn't cast anything. And during the next turn, even with a reroll to his first Dispel, he failed to dispel anything. But it was made up for by the orcs and goblins, as on the second turn of the orcs, every single war machine they had misfired, except for the Doom Diver. They had 4 war machines, 2 Spear Chukkas, a Catapult, and a Doom Diver. The Spear Chukkas are special bolt throwers that if they roll a 1, they have to roll on the Stone Thrower misfire chart. And they both rolled 1s to hit. They both couldn't fire that turn or the next, and the Stone Thrower, it misfired and actually destroyed itself. So on the second turn, our shooting for the destruction side was shut down like immensely. The Black Coach was also outmaneuvered by a Stegodon on the right flank, which eventually it got charged by the Stegodon, which had piercing horns, that the ability or upgrade that makes it so they do D3 wounds with their impact hits. Well, that didn't affect the Chariot too badly because he rolled very low for his impact hits. The Chariot still died to combat resolution because he was charged in the flank, and the Triceratops caused a wound, and the white on top of the Chariot only caused like 1 wound in return. And so the Chariot died just to combat res. There was another Chariot, an Orc Chariot on our far left flank, that got charged by the Sky Chariot of the High Elves, and that died as well. There were a lot of Sisters of Avalorn, I believe, or their handmaidens, that were on the left side. So the strength 4 flaming bows, very bad for everything that we were trying to do. And in the middle of the table, the tar pits of the zombies were kept in combat for quite some time. They kept the Temple Guard and the Phoenix Guard in a grueling combat that saw some Temple Guard die, and maybe 1 or 2 Phoenix Guard, but it kept them out of range of the tower. Nobody was brave enough to go into the tower with the vampires in it because they were very deadly. essentially unmounted Blood Knights with full plate and great weapons. And so we wanted to weaken the tower first before we went into it, but with our shooting having been shut down so badly from our own misfires, we had very little we could do, and our magic started getting countered more effectively. The Necromancer lost his Invocation of Nehek on like the second turn, and so he couldn't raise back anything for his army, which was immensely important for him, because my undead army is effectively built around resurrecting models. That's why zombies are taken instead of skeletons. You can raise more of them, you can raise them above max. Why I have Crypt Horrors, because they don't count as vampiric, ethereal, or large targets, so they can get healed for 1 plus the caster level. Stuff like that. The army's toughness greatly degrades when he can't cast Invocation of Nehek. But there were some shining moments. The Orc boys and the Orc war boss managed to wipe out the Temple Guard. They managed to cause the Phoenix Guard to flee, but they failed to catch the Phoenix Guard, so they rallied the next turn. The Trolls and the Stegodon charged into the Trolls. Didn't do that many wounds to the Trolls. I believe he did something along the lines of 5, maybe? Probably not even that. And the Trolls and the Stegodon, it was 1 Troll with 3 wounds and 1 with 1, and the Stegodon with 4 wounds. They fought each other for nearly 5 rounds before that combat was concluded, neither being able to hit or wound each other. They were all quite terrible in that regard. Eventually, the boys were shot down to the combined fire of all of the elven archers that had remained unmolested, because both the orc and the undead army were rather immobile and had nothing that could really travel great distances over a short period of time, especially not through non-magical means. And so the forces of Order won, and the lake was dredged up by the skinks. As soon as they started looking for the lucky bones, misfortune spirits came out of the lake, forcing anybody that traveled into the lake to reroll all successful rolls of anything. The High Elves found the casket in the undead deployment zone, which housed a vampire, and staked it through the heart before it could attack them. And so they took his ring. The Goblin Shaman did amazingly well, more so than the Slann, and there was no Elven caster on his side. So all objectives were taken, even the Goblin. The Goblin was actually the star caster of the destruction side, casting and stealing many dice in the entirety of the battle. So for the remainder of the campaign, both of the armies of Order got their bonuses, and the armies of Destruction did not receive any bonuses except for the Orcs, who would receive a bonus to their casting ability because of their accomplished objective. I'm getting to the end of this video here. You can see as we're just wrapping up, there are a few points where we could have possibly won as we cleared out the tower, and I tried to move my Necromancer magically into the tower to get the win, but it was dispelled easily by the Lizardmen. So thank you for watching, and I will be back next week. Have a good night.